This is Israel, generations after entering the Promised Land, and once again, the nation finds itself under foreign rule. This time, the oppressor is Philistia, a coastal power with iron weapons and fortified cities, ruling over Israel for 40 long years. We're never told her name, only that she was barren, in a culture where that absence carried enormous social weight. And it's to her, not to Manoah, that the angel of the Lord appears first. Angel of the Lord, you are barren and have had no children, but you will conceive and give birth to a son. Now be careful not to drink wine or fermented drink, or eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite dedicated to God from the womb. He will begin the deliverance of Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Manoah praying, teach us how to bring up the boy who is to be born. The angel returns, repeating the same instructions with no additional explanation, no further detail. When Manoah offers a meal, the angel instructs him to offer it instead as a burnt sacrifice to the Lord. And as the flame rises from the altar, the angel ascends in the flame itself and is gone. Manoah, terrified, is convinced they will die for having seen God face to face. His wife, more level-headed, points out the obvious. If the Lord meant to kill them, He wouldn't have just accepted their offering and made them a promise about a son they hadn't even conceived yet. The child is born. They name him Samson. And from his very first breath, his entire identity is bound up in a single, simple, external rule: the razor never touches his head. Not a rule about his character. Not a rule about his choices. A rule about his hair. And everything about how this story ends will hinge on how casually he treats that one condition. Samson grows up, blessed by the Lord. And at some point, the Spirit of the Lord begins to stir in him. But from nearly the very first moment we see him as an adult, a pattern emerges that will define the rest of his life. He sees a Philistine woman in Timnah and returns home, demanding his parents arrange the marriage. His parents object. Marrying outside Israel, especially to the very people oppressing them, was a serious concern. Samson's answer is blunt. Get her for me. She's the right one for me. The text adds a striking detail here, that this, too, was, from the Lord, part of a larger plan to create conflict with the Philistines. But notice, God works through Samson's impulsiveness rather than around it. His weakness for forbidden relationships isn't corrected here. It's simply used. On the road to arrange the marriage, this is where our cold open lion encounter takes place. Samson alone, the lion's attack, the spirit rushing on him, the animal torn apart with his bare hands. He tells no one. Later, returning for the wedding, he passes the lion's carcass again and finds a swarm of bees has made honey inside it. He eats some, shares it with his parents, still without explaining where it came from. This becomes the seed of his famous wedding riddle, a bet with 30 Philistine groomsmen, 30 sets of clothing on the line. Samson, riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat, out of the strong, something sweet. The groomsmen, unable to solve it, pressure Samson's new bride relentlessly across the 7 days of the wedding feast, until, worn down by her tears and threats against her family, she extracts the answer from him and passes it to the men. Notice this moment closely, because it is, in miniature, the entire Delilah story that's coming. A woman close to him, weeping and pressuring him daily, wearing him down until he gives up a secret he shouldn't have. This isn't Delilah's invention. It's a pattern Samson has already fallen into once before, and somehow never learns from. Furious at the betrayal, Samson goes to Ashkelon, kills 30 Philistine men to pay off the bet with their belongings, and abandons his bride entirely, returning to his father's house in anger. His father-in-law, assuming the marriage over, gives the bride to another man. When Samson returns later to reclaim her and discovers she's been given away, his response escalates the conflict dramatically, tying torches to foxes' tails and burning entire Philistine grain fields, vineyards, and olive groves. The Philistines retaliate by burning his former wife and her father to death. Samson responds with a slaughter of his own. This is the cycle of his entire life: personal desire, betrayal by someone close to him, devastating retaliation, temporary peace, repeat. By the time we reach the jawbone battle from our cold open, 1,000 men dead by his hand alone, Samson has become something between a folk hero and a walking disaster, unstoppable in strength and completely unrestrained in judgment. He judges Israel for 20 years, and then, in the Philistine city of Gaza, we see the pattern one more time. Samson, seen entering the city, the gates locked to trap him inside overnight. He simply rises at midnight, tears the entire city gate, posts, bars, and all, off its hinges, and carries it uphill on his shoulders, miles away, just to prove it can hold him. No physical structure can trap this man. No rope, no ambush, no army. Which makes what happens next almost impossible to believe, until you remember, it was never really about strength. Samson falls in love with a woman named Delilah, in the valley of Sorek. We're told almost nothing about her background, her motives, or her feelings, only what happens next, which tells us everything we actually need to know. The rulers of the Philistines, 5 city lords, representing the full political and military weight of the enemy, come to Delilah directly, with an enormous offer. Philistine lord, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength, and how we can overpower him, tie him up, and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. To put that number in perspective, this is roughly the annual wages of dozens of laborers, multiplied by 5 separate rulers, all offered to a single woman for one piece of information. This isn't a small bribe. This is a fortune large enough to change the course of her entire life. Delilah agrees. What follows is one of the most uncomfortable sequences in the entire Bible, not because of what happens, but because of how obvious it becomes, and how long Samson takes to notice. First lie. Delilah, in a private moment with Samson, asks directly, "Tell me the secret of your great strength, and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answers, "A lie, but a strange, oddly specific one. If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." That night, while he sleeps, Delilah has him bound with 7 fresh bowstrings. Philistine men wait, hidden, in an adjoining room. Delilah calling out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He wakes, snaps the bowstrings as easily as a piece of thread singed by fire, and the secret remains exactly that, a secret. Notice, Philistine soldiers are already hiding in the house. Samson has already been tricked into a false answer once. And still, he stays. Second lie. Delilah confronts him again, almost playfully accusing him of making a fool of her with lies. "You have made a fool of me, you lied to me. Now tell me how you can be tied. If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." Again bound in his sleep with new rope. Again, the ambush waiting in the next room. Again, Delilah calling out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He snaps the ropes off his arms like they were nothing at all. 2 attempts. 2 lies. 2 ambushes he's now fully aware are hiding in the next room, because he's heard the same phrase, seen the same men waiting, twice in a row. And still, he doesn't leave. Third lie. Delilah tries again, and this time Samson's answer edges dangerously close to the truth, as if some part of him wants to see how far he can push this before something actually goes wrong. "Samson, if you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." While he sleeps, Delilah weaves his hair into her loom's fabric and secures it. A third time, the cry goes out. Delilah calling out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He wakes, pulls up the pin and the loom's fabric along with it, and walks away untouched, the secret, for now, still intact. 3 lies. 3 ambushes. 3 near misses that should have been 3 warning shots loud enough for anyone to hear. And yet Samson stays in that house, with that woman, night after night, as if the pattern itself means nothing to him. What finally breaks him isn't a clever trick. It's not manipulation through fear or violence. It's something much more ordinary, And in some ways much more devastating, she simply doesn't stop asking. How can you say, "I love you," when you won't confide in me? This is the third time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. The text describes what happens next in plain, almost clinical language. She nagged him with her words day after day, pestering him until, the account says, his soul was vexed to death. Vexed to death. Not physically threatened. Not tortured. Worn down, emotionally, by relentless pressure, until dying almost seemed preferable to enduring one more round of the same question. Samson. No razor has ever been used on my head, because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man. The whole truth, finally, after 3 deflections. And notice, Delilah recognizes immediately that this time is different. She's heard 3 false answers before. She knows, somehow, that this one isn't like the others. Delilah sends word to the Philistine rulers. Come back once more. He has told me everything. The silver is prepared. The soldiers gather, waiting nearby, more confident this time than the previous 3. That night, Samson lies down, his head resting in Delilah's lap. This detail matters. Not chained. Not drugged. Not overpowered by force. He simply falls asleep, trusting the one person who has now demonstrated, 3 separate times, in the clearest possible terms, that she is actively working with his enemies to destroy him. She calls for a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. His strength begins to leave him without his knowledge. Delilah calling out 4th time, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. He doesn't know. That's the horror of the moment, not that he loses a fight, but that he walks into one with total confidence, completely unaware that the thing that made him invincible is already gone. The Philistine sees him easily this time. There is no struggle at all. And here is where our cold open finally makes sense. The man who tore apart a lion, who snapped ropes and bowstrings like thread, who carried off an entire city gate on his shoulders, is taken without a single moment of resistance, because the strength was never really in the hair itself. The hair was simply the visible sign of a vow he had spent his entire life treating as negotiable. What follows is brutal, and the text does not soften it. The Philistines gouge out his eyes, a punishment as symbolic as it is cruel, since it strips away not just his strength but his sight, leaving him in permanent physical darkness to match, in some sense, the blindness he'd already been living in. They bring him down to Gaza, bind him with bronze shackles, and set him to grinding grain in a prison mill, a task typically given to animals, now performed by the strongest man in Israel's history, blind, humiliated, and stripped of everything that once made him remarkable. And then, almost as an aside, the text tells us something easy to miss the first time you read it. While he grinds grain in that prison, day after day, in the dark, his hair begins to grow back. No one notices. No one is watching for it. It isn't part of anyone's plan. It simply happens quietly, the way consequences of broken vows and the beginnings of restoration often happen, out of sight, in the middle of what looks like total defeat. Time passes. The Philistine rulers gather for a massive festival honoring their god Dagon, crediting their idol for delivering their greatest enemy into their hands. Philistine crowd, chanting, Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste to our land and multiplied our slain. In the midst of the celebration, drunk on victory, they call for Samson to be brought out from the prison, not to harm him further, but to mock him, to put his humiliation on public display as entertainment. He is led out by a servant boy, blind, chained, paraded in front of thousands of Philistines packed into the temple and crowding its roof to watch. This is meant to be the final, complete victory lap over Israel's greatest champion. Samson, standing between the 2 central support pillars of the temple, quietly asks the servant boy leading him to let him feel the pillars, so he can lean against them. And then, for the first time in the entire story, Samson does something we've never actually seen him do before. He prays, not for revenge dressed up as righteousness, not for another display of strength for its own sake, but simply, honestly, for one more chance. Samson praying, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." He places one hand on each of the 2 central pillars. "Let me die with the Philistines!" He pushes with all his strength. The pillars give way. The roof and upper structure of the temple collapse entirely, crushing the rulers and the thousands gathered above and around them. The text tells us something remarkable in its final accounting. Samson killed more Philistines in his death than he had killed in his entire life. Samson's family later comes to recover his body, burying him in his father's tomb. He had judged Israel for 20 years, a long career for a man defined almost entirely by impulsiveness, broken promises, and a pattern of trusting exactly the wrong people at exactly the wrong moments. It's tempting to make this a simple story about a woman's betrayal. But look again at everything that happened before Delilah ever entered the picture: the wedding riddle, the wife who wept the answer out of him, the pattern of impulsive desire followed by devastating consequence, repeated over and over across 20 years, long before Delilah's name ever appears in the story. Delilah didn't create Samson's weakness. She was simply the last, most expensive version of a pattern he had already shown the world, again and again, that he was willing to repeat. His strength was never really in his hair. It was in a vow he was asked to guard, the one condition attached to an extraordinary gift, treated for most of his life as a minor inconvenience rather than the entire foundation his power stood on. The most dangerous moment in Samson's story was never the night the Philistines finally caught him. It was every quiet night before that one, when the warning signs were already obvious, and he simply chose to stay anyway.